In this series, I'm going to explore Cisco IOS. Computers, in order to communicate, need to be connected to the network. And the two basic components of a network that make the computer's communication tick are switches and routers, and that's what I'm going to focus on here. I have the Cisco virtual lab, which I can use to explore and mess around without any damage. And what I'm going to do is actually, here is the switch, which I'm going to configure from scratch. But in order to do that, I need to know how the Cisco IOS operating system that is installed on switches and routers here is actually working. So initially, when I start my switch or router and it doesn't have any configuration saved, it presents me with a wizard which allows only to configure the management IP address, password, and hostname. Not much, so I can skip that wizard and do this by hand from scratch. So the first thing I want to look at is what is presented on the screen. There is no GUI, there is no graphical user interface. All we have is a command line interface to configure those devices. Now, here there's a switch without any initial configuration, so what it does, it presents me with the switch keyword and the greater than sign. That greater than sign in the prompt is important because it indicates that I am in the user exec mode. There are two major exec modes. This one is user exec mode, which does not allow to configure much, and even monitoring of a device is somewhat limited. For monitoring of those devices, there are two major commands to remember. One is the show command, show something, and the debug command, debug something. But debugs might be dangerous on the production systems, so they need to be used with some caution. But show commands can be safely used at any point, even on the production devices. So if I am in this user exec mode, I can display help and display what the commands are available in this context. If I do this by pressing question mark, if I press a question mark, it displays on the screen, on the left hand side, command, on the right hand side, explanation as to what the command really does. So now, in order to display more commands in this particular context, there is a more keyword at the end here on the screen that indicates that there are more commands to be displayed. I can scroll by those commands using Enter key, which scrolls line by line, or I can press the space bar, and this will display screen by screen. Since there are not many commands here, it just ended. At any point, if I don't want to display screens upon screens of the output, I can interrupt that display more by pressing Q letter for quit, and it stops immediately. So let's look at some commands we can use. I just mentioned the show command is one of the basic commands. So if I do show and press enter, it says, okay, do show space question mark for a list of commands that are using in the show output. So if I do show space question mark, it displays way more command now available with the show keyword. So screen by screen. If I want to stop, Q for quit. One of the commands here says show clock. Let's just say if I do show clock and press enter, it displays the clock. Now, what if I did not remember? I remember the command started with C, but I don't remember what it was. I can do C without space, put question mark, and it'll display all the show commands that are followed by the word with a C. Calendar, clock, controls, and so on and so forth. If I put more letters, it'll narrow down this output to class map and clock. Now, if I misspell the command, let's say do clock like this, there's built-in error messaging. It says that invalid input has been detected at the caret marker. So that means that it did recognize CLO, but it doesn't know what to do with the K afterwards. So what I can do now, just remove that K, do question mark without space, and now it tells me what the command starts with here. Oh, it's show clock. And if there are no other parameters, it will accept the command. So pressing enter actually executes the command. That's how we say, hey, do this command for me. And we need to be very careful when we do that, because the commands, once entered into the system and correct from syntax perspective, will be executed. If we do something dodgy but syntactically correct, it'll be executed without any question. So I'll be doing millions of those show commands, so we can pick up as to what those are later on. Let me clear the screen right now. So in this mode, we cannot do much, so let's enter another mode of operation called privilege mode, or enabled mode, or level 15 mode. We do this by typing enable keyword and pressing enter. Let's see the question mark and scroll down to enable. So if I see this command enable here in the list, it says turn on privileged commands. Let's do that. So I'll say enable, and if I do space question mark, it can take a bunch of arguments. One is the enable mode, so we'll talk about that later, how many modes of operations we can create on our own. There's 0 and 1 and 15, those are default, but in between 1 and 15, which is actually 2 through 14, can be user modes. We can create user modes allowing to do different commands and limited in scope, but more about that later. View is an existing view, forget about that now. And CR, that's important. That means that I don't need to use any of those options. I might as well hit enter, which means carriage return. If I do that, the command will be accepted. So if I say enable now, enter, I am ending up in a different prompt. Now the prompt changed from this greater than sign to this hash. And hash means that I am in the privilege mode. In fact, I can do show privilege, and it tells me that I am currently in the privilege level 15 mode. How do I get back to this user exec mode? Well, the command is disable. And if I do disable, show privilege, I am now in the level 1 mode. Now, in Cisco iOS, I don't need to type in the full command. It is enough for me to type the amount of letters that are unique for a particular command. So for instance, if I wanted to go enable mode and I typed just E keyword, and I'm thinking, oh, this must be enable because I can use shortcuts, right? It says ambiguous commands. What this means is that there are more than one command in this context, in this user exec mode, that starts with E. So what I can do is just type in E question mark, no space here, and I can see which command starts with letter E in this particular context. And there's enable, so if I type in EN, that is enough letters to uniquely identify the command in the list starting with those letters. If I now hit enter, it goes there. So the same way, if I want to get back, if I say DI, enter, it'll say, oh, ambiguous command DI. I don't know what DI means. There's more than one command starting with DI letters. So if I repeat that and do question mark, or I can see disabled. So if I say this A, it'll work. Now I can also autocomplete the command. So if I say EN and press tab, if there's enough letters to uniquely recognize the command, it'll just display the whole command for me. Same way, same thing here. If I do DIS, it's not enough because there are two commands in this mode, disable and disconnect. So if I hit enter, I'm getting my ambiguous command. If I add the letter A, it'll work.